Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in, and welcome to the first of Property Button's webinar series on how to stay cool during student season. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes here, guys, just to give everyone a chance to sign in. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for tuning in for the first of Property Button's webinar series. Today we're going to be speaking all about how to stay cool during the busy student season. We're just going to give everyone a couple of minutes just to get registered in and get set up, get a cup of tea or coffee. Okay, so thanks everyone. Just to go through a couple of details here. Now I'm hoping I'll be able to go through my slides. Apologies here. Let's see now. Okay, so just to start off with some webinar details. The webinar should go on no longer than 50 minutes, and there is a question box on your right-hand side. Please feel free to join in with any questions you have throughout the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to play back or share, please share at any time, and you'll be emailed with the recording and all the slides within 48 hours. We'll also be posting the webinar in our blog section of our website as well. So feel free to plan accordingly and look forward to that email. So just a little bit about today's presenters. My name is Andrew Sheehan. I'm the marketing manager here at Property Button. I've been in the company for the past, well, give it a year actually, and I've been enjoying it ever since. Lots of action in the property sector, as we all know at the moment. And I'm also joined by our guest speaker, Carol Tallon. Carol Tallon is an author, a speaker, and a strategist. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for inviting me along. I'm delighted to join in.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. So just to give everyone an overview of today's agenda, we're going to be covering a couple of areas. We're going to look at the current student rental market and the state it's in at the moment, some of the challenges that the property professionals, in particular the letting agents, are finding during the busy student season, and offering some solutions to those challenges. And we're also going to be touching on and offering tips and hints on how to maximize landlord retention and boost referrals going forward, and also offering some tips and hints on finding the perfect tenant, which is not often easy in a student environment. And we're just going to cap off the webinar then on an open discussion. Please feel free to join in with questions and comments on the future of Ireland's rental industry. So just to remind everyone, just to have their microphones on mute. Thank you very much. So just quickly, just to go, for all the listeners out there who are not already familiar with Property Button, Property Button was established in 2012 by our fun-loving CEO, Jim Urell. And, well, a little bit about who we are. We're an award-winning property technology company, and we have a real vision here to maximize occupancy. And how we do that, or what we do, is we help property professionals by streamlining their tasks. And we do that by providing simple digital tools combined with property information and data to offer property professionals digital solutions to streamline their tasks. We work with all property professionals, letting agents, estate agents, property managers, and their respective tenants and home buyers. And we have some core values in here in Property Button, and we really stick by our core values. We're an honest company. We're very upbeat. We enjoy what we do, and we love our clients. We're very practical, dependable, and we're always approachable. And we promote our customers calling in, asking questions at any time. So just to get into the agenda then, first on our agenda today is to look at the current student rental market and where it's currently at. And we've identified these kind of 5 areas at the moment that are kind of pain points for students and as a result for letting agents and all property professionals. But looking at the number of students at the moment, population of the Irish state is almost 4.6 million at the moment. It's the highest in 150 years. And this is predicted to grow to 5.2 million by 2031. The Higher Education Authority has estimated that there's 168,000 full-time students at the moment, and this is estimated to grow to 193,000 in 2024. From a capacity point of view then, the government's Construction 2020 strategy provides a great foundation for rebuilding a sustainable construction sector in Ireland. And the social housing strategy aims to provide 35,000 social homes, but it doesn't really recognise students and the need for purpose-built student accommodation. Absolutely, I can jump in there, Carol, anytime.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think I've been a huge supporter of the Construction 2020, but I would absolutely take your point that it doesn't really emphasise the need for student accommodation, and there's actually a very simple reason for that. And the reason is that developing student accommodation, it is the single most profitable form of residential property development. And that's not always a politically correct thing to say out loud, because we don't like to think of property developers making too much money. But here's the reality: it is the most profitable sector of development, and in fact, it's an area that we are badly in need of. We have huge tracts of land available, and in fact, every Sunday in the Sunday papers we can go through the latest planning decisions, and what we know is that week after week after week, we know that planning permission is being granted for more and more student homes. In fact, just in the last week, I saw that we have not only our own Irish developers, but in fact we've got UK tech investors, tech VC investors, actually coming over and saying, you know, maybe we'll dip our toe on the property developer market. And in fact, there's one company, Sumex, and they're on track to deliver 1,000 student rooms in the next 2 years.
Great.
Segurat, which is really an Irish company, I shouldn't call it a UK company at all, although they did have their origins in the UK. They're on track to provide 4,000 student rooms over the next short number of years. In fact, they're the people behind the Montrose development, and they've been instrumental in making the environment attractive for student accommodation. But already we know that there's about 1,000 new beds coming on stream in Dublin alone in student accommodation this market, with so many more planned. So yes, we have a huge issue with undersupply, but developers are actively working towards that at the moment, and they're very much incentivized towards it. So in fact, they don't really, it's the one area of development that they don't need to be incentivized by the state, that the market is incentive enough.
Which is great news for the letting agents out there that are struggling to cope with this demand and the current lack of supply. But it's great to see and great to get insights into the market and into where it's going, and it makes this slide kind of a little bit more relevant, because as we look at it today, the current number of bed spaces suitable for a student accommodation provided by the Higher Education Authority, as you can see there, is at 31,000, and those figures were taken from 2014, and they haven't changed too far from then. And we can see back in 2014, in terms of bed space demand from students, we were looking at approximately 57,000, and that's predicted to grow to nearly 63,000 in 2019. And again to 69,000 in 2024, compared to their predictions of student accommodation supply, which are up to 40k and 44k in the same period. So we can see from the HEA, or the Higher Education Authority's perspective, demand is currently outstripping supply, but it's great to hear those other companies coming on board and developing.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, there's no doubt that even over the next Definitely 5-year period and probably longer. We're still going to be stuck in this scenario where demand will outstrip supply. The only thing I would say in its favour is that actually this breakdown or this discrepancy actually is much less of a problem in the student market accommodation than in the general residential market in Dublin. But actually what's really changed though is that it's becoming more of a niche area, a targeted area. So before we were just looking at residential development. Now, I think in the last 10 years, what's really changed is student accommodation is seen as a sector within the industry in its own right. And that creates so many opportunities, and not only commercial opportunities for the letting agents and for the developers, but there's an opportunity to get the quality of accommodation really right for students and for landlords.
Absolutely, which is great. And it brings me back to this previous slide as well, where we talk about the housing quality in a moment. But another pain point for students, and one of the issues in the current student rental market, is just the rising rent across the nation. It's increasing nationally, and the average rent is currently stands at €1,131 from the Q1 2017 DAC report, and this goes well beyond DIT's cost of living, which they say for an average student living out of home for a month is $1,222 for everything, for the cost of living. So the rising rent is definitely causing an issue in the market. And moving on then quickly, just the tenant churn. It's just the fact that it's a very seasonal service and very seasonal product, which brings issues to the market as a whole. Students, obviously, they're all looking for places at the same time. That obviously causes real problems for letting agents as well, because it's just caused this herding effect in the market, which doesn't help anyone's cause. And then going back to Carol's comment there just about housing quality, and there's a thought out there that there's a lack, especially amongst students and other parties, there's a lack of purpose-built student accommodation, and there could be some real quick wins in there for society, for the government, and for letting agents as a whole.
Yeah, that's entirely correct. Yeah.
So moving on then, and just not spending any more time on that previous slide, just looking into some of the challenges faced by property professionals then, after reviewing some of the existing fundamentals there in the market. And you know, anyone that currently rents to students know they are dealing with a special breed of resident. And if you're new to the student market, be warned, most of these guys, 18-year-olds, have never lived away from home before. So, and just to bear in mind, there's a variety of student types out there, but a few things are definitely certain. Students can be very unpredictable. They come and go, and they're often under financial strain through no fault of their own. But this kind of behaviour can be real problematic for letting agents, and it leads to high turnover and maintenance issues, and sometimes even evictions as well. So just bear in mind that they are a very special breed of residents. And you know, it brings me on to some of the challenges faced by letting agents in that regard, and I refer to this as the challenge tree that just keeps on growing every year. And some of the problems that, from my experience from talking to letting agents as part of this webinar and my day-to-day market research, is that, you know, emotion and empathy play a big part in the student season, because it's quite often that it's the parents of students that are calling the letting agents, pleading and sometimes begging to take their precious babies into accommodation for their first year or to renew a lease. And that can get quite personal for a letting agent, and emotion starts getting involved, and that's a challenge that letting agents face every year. But also, you need to meet your client's expectations. A letting agent needs to meet their landlord's expectations, and I think that's only fair. But it's conflicting between, obviously, you know, a student resident looking for accommodation, but you need to make sure that the tenant is perfect for your landlord at all times.
Yeah, and there's a huge element here that, and I'm so glad that you've actually included emotion and empathy here, because I think that too many professionals don't take that into consideration. And you have to remember that, yes, it is certainly, it's a different type of tenant that you're dealing with, but it's a tenant that's undergoing huge changes anyway. So for most of these students, it's their first time away from home. For many of these parents, it's their first child to leave home. Most of them are not experienced with the rental market, either as landlords or tenants. Most of them would have been in their own home and potentially paying their mortgage for the last 20, 25 years.
Absolutely.
So in fact, it is a period of firsts for many of these, and it means that you've got a lot of uncertainty. So, actually the tenants, the students themselves and their parents, they require a lot more, I won't say hand-holding, but they certainly require a lot more communication.
Yeah.
There's definitely a higher degree of care needed, and emotions do run high, and in fact letting agents who are not aware of that will find this a challenging time, because remember, not only is there a huge batch coming into the market at one time, but they're all under pressure to secure accommodation. Sometimes they will have 1 day, sometimes they will have 3 days, they will never have longer than a week to find this accommodation. So it's this huge market being funneled into a very tiny time frame.
Absolutely,
so of course,
absolutely, and you know that's compiled by the constant churn in the market as well. It's an annual process, and you raised there, it actually involves a little bit more communication to these types of tenants, which is very administrative. And you know, this is where a lot of the challenges come in for letting agents during this seasonal time, to residents that are unpredictable and need a little bit more hand-holding. And one of the areas is in the lease setup, and that can be a long process currently in itself. So there's also the area of deposits, which isn't too bad. From talking to letting agents, that's often guaranteed and often provided by the parents, so not too bad. But again, it's just about managing that admin on top of everything else. And the students can be very demanding, and they're a young population. They're on their phones, and everything now is on the go and ready for them, and they're almost now expecting that from a property side of things as well. And also another big admin area from talking to our customers is the transfer of utilities. And when you're compounding this by a big student rush every year with hundreds of students coming through your door, transferring those utilities can be a big administrative burden, and there's lots of costs involved. On top of that administration, the lease setup, paper, ink, postage, you name it, transferring the utilities, if they're not already using our utility management service, can be a real time-consuming process for a lot of letting agents out there, calling suppliers, getting NPRN numbers, and that kind of thing. And also then just the management and inspection of these properties, these student type dwellings, or just private dwellings that students are living in. And it's important that, you know, your students aren't messing the place. But that is one of the challenges that letting agents face every year during the student season. And then really key to a lot of this then, and one of the big challenges is finding that perfect tenant to suit your landlord's expectations. And we will be delving a little bit more into that later on, but some of the areas around finding the right tenants, it touches on the fear of rent being paid late or maybe not being paid at all, and verifying the references that you receive from your students. And that at the moment can be a real challenge for letting agents out there. And a big area, of course, is regulation. And with the changes in regulation and the new changes coming up in regulation, that can be a webinar in itself, and which we actually hope to do here in PropDocs as part of our webinar series, is to offer solutions and offer more bite-sized pieces of regulation to our customers and our letting agents and property professionals out there, so they can understand it better. Yeah. But it's dealing with all these students, all the admin burden, all the challenges, on top of the existing regulation, which is quite complicated at the moment, and there's lots of it.
It is, and it's convoluted as well, so it isn't like we've got one document to point to and say these are the regulations, this is what we must comply with. It's quite convoluted. There's a number of different regulations to be complied with, and in fact I think that's one of the challenges that professional letting agents have at the moment, because they need to strike the balance between delivering great service to the tenant and actually satisfying the landlord that they are on top of their compliance requirements, and communicating that to the landlord. So in fact, I think that letting agents at the moment, they've actually got quite a challenge on their hands to satisfy both sides, and compliance with regulations is a huge issue, and in fact the only way they can do that is by having a great relationship with their landlord.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why we're going to have a webinar dedicated to regulation in the market, and hopefully that will be helpful to some of our listeners out there as well.
It'll be interesting to find out where the pain points are in terms of compliance and regulation in advance of that.
Absolutely,
I know that there's a problem on the ground.
Absolutely. So expect a phone call from you guys as part of my market research. But look, all of these challenges, they come down to one big thing, and you know, your to-do list is just so many things, and it can become quite overwhelming. But just looking at the tenancy setup and, you know, the existing process of setting up a new tenancy, there's 7 steps, and that's being generous, because within each step there's actually plenty of other steps, and I've kind of compiled them here into 7 kind of areas. And the first being just to verify the tenant references, and then choose the tenants based on those verifications. And then we're going into collecting the security deposit in advance, and then we put structured agreements in place and prepare the lease and print the lease, and that's just before moving into the property. And then we need to obtain the signatures in a traditional way, which is often involves the letting agent having to go into the property, or the student having to come into the office, which again is time-consuming process out of your day, out of the tenant's day, out of your landlord's day, because when the signatures are signed then from the tenant, we then need to obtain signatures from the landlord as well. And it's very important there, because with the RTB, they want to see leases signed, and at the moment, signing the leases, preparing the leases, is a real time-consuming and administrative process during the student season for letting agents. Another key area then, as part of the setting up the new tenancy, is number 6 there, transferring of the utilities. That is a real time-consuming process as well. And then we finish off then the tenancy with registering the property with the RTB, which is a really valuable service that letting agents offer to their clients, which is sometimes overlooked by landlords, but it is a very valuable service that they offer. But from my talking to our customers, these are the areas that were involved in setting up the new tenancy. But with that, there was 3 areas that kind of came up as constant challenges, and that was identifying good tenants. The lease process in itself is a real challenge area, and the transferring of utilities is also a real time-consuming, challenging area during a busy time. And fortunately here at Property Button, we actually touch on 2 of those 3 areas, which are the lease process and the transferring of utilities. And what were it?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think you raised a great point there, and the issue with obtaining landlord signatures, because actually we have such an issue now with landlords living outside of Ireland, or at least living outside of the areas that people are in. That, in fact, when you talk about those 7 steps, if you think about it, losing a day in a delay doesn't seem like a lot, but if you lose a day per step, then suddenly you're a week behind, and a week is the difference between the tenants you originally identified actually being on board, actually coming on board. So it's not just the loss of rent. Every time there's a delay in a step, there's a vulnerability sneaks into the chain and into the process. So in fact, by automating this and by streamlining this, you're not just cutting out delays, you're actually maintaining the confidence of the tenant that you first attracted. Because actually it is important. I know that we're in a time when there are, again, greater demand than there is supply, but that makes it all the more important that you don't just go for the available tenant, that you get the that you get the right tenant. And losing time by sending leases away to landlords to sign, that has been a problem on the ground. So that's something that I'm really interested in to see, because I know that this is a trend that's happening. So how do you deal with that problem?
So we will get to that, and what we do currently is we offer our product to letting agents called PropDocs, and PropDocs is a electronic lease service where, and I'll get into it now in a little bit, but letting agents can use PropDocs to prepare their electronic leases in a very simple way, and they can simply send that out to tenants and landlords in an email type format, and the landlord and the tenant can just sign it very simply on their phone, on their tablet, anywhere at any time. So it definitely streamlines that process, and we'll definitely get into that later in this webinar, because it's a really exciting space at the moment, and it's a really beneficial tool to letting agents. But all of those challenges and those steps, you know, as part of setting up a new tenancy, they're all compounded and compiled by the student rush. The queue is going out your door, and you mentioned there, Carol, just the loss of rent through that long process as it currently stands of getting leases signed. The landlord's wondering, where's my money? Where's my return on investment here? Why am I only getting this lease a week into the student season, or a month into the student season, and that could have been a month's rent? So, you know, streamlining this process and offering a different solution, different unique selling points to your clients offers real value and happier landlords, hopefully. So going into some of the solutions to some of those many challenges and those key challenges identified, we're talking about, well, this is a quote I love from Albert Einstein, and I think it's quite relevant here, is, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So we need to start thinking a little bit out of the box, we need to start thinking a little bit forward, and we need to start thinking about using real simple tools, such as PropDocs, just to streamline and automate some of the real basic tasks, but the time-consuming tasks as well. And that kind of brings me on to the area of property technology. And there is this pervasive underlying fear, Carol, that software and the cloud and robotics will be the undoing of us all, and where's it all going? But in reality, it's much more likely, isn't it, that prop tech and any kind of technology, it isn't going to destroy us or take our jobs. It's in fact, it's likely going to help us do our jobs better.
Yeah, look, PropTech is an area that I'm hugely passionate about, and I have been for the last number of years. And whenever I hear this, and you're right, this is a fear that people almost know how ridiculous it is when they say it out loud. But it's a little bit like many decades ago, people feared that computers would take people's jobs. And in fact, as we see, I'm looking through the glass here at your offices, and what we've got more than 30 people all sitting with a computer in front of them, and in fact they could not do their job without this. So it could be argued that computers created those jobs, and I would see the same with technology. And I suppose the other thing about PropTech, while it feels quite new, it really isn't. Every new generation of buyers, they have a new expectation, and the reality is that the generation of tenants and property buyers and landlords that we're dealing with at the moment, they just have an expectation about how they live outside of the property expectation. So, for example, we have an idea about how we want to order public transport now, thanks to Uber. We have an idea about how we want to conduct our stays when we're traveling overseas, whether it's through the Airbnb model or otherwise. So the reality is that how we live has changed. So therefore, how we service homes has to change. It really is quite simple. It's always demand led. Once we change how we live, then we expect services to get easier. We don't expect, it's a little bit like banking. Can you imagine ever a time before ATMs? Could you imagine having to take time out of your day to queue to go into a branch to get money? It's just an expectation of how we live now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are so many avenues within property technology that can assist property professionals throughout each stage of the process, and PropTyButton can accommodate accordingly. And some of the key areas that I've found is just with marketing your rental properties and using technology to do that, advertising your vacancies, of course, and accepting applications. But you can also use technology now to screen renters, and of course sign leases now, which hasn't really picked up here in Ireland, the whole area of electronic leases. But I think it will over time, and I think it's a really interesting space, and I'd like to tell you a little bit more about that. And conducting inspections now is also a feature now with technology in the property sector as well. And so, just on signing leases, as part of overcoming some of the challenges during the busy student season, because of the ebb and flow nature of the student housing market, it's super important to have a real streamlined leasing process in place, because otherwise student housing can be too overwhelming for property managers and letting agents. And here are some of the areas where technology can make a big difference. And with PropDocs, you can customize your online lease templates to suit just student type leases, and online leases and electronic signatures just make signing a breeze for the student and for the landlord, and then therefore a breeze to your tasks. And you can secure renters on the spot. So no longer do you have to fear about an unpredictable student saying they'll take a property 2 weeks in, they still haven't signed the lease, and now your landlord's giving out because it's been 2-3 weeks into it, and they still haven't got a deposit, and they still not making rental income.
See, I love the concept that you're not expecting tenants while they're sitting at home on their couch, you're not expecting them to have access to a printer or a printer with a scanner. They don't even have to take photographs and send things back to you. It's coming in on their smartphones or their tablets, whatever they're using, and it's the touch of a button and then it's returned. That's what people want now. In fact, I find it such an annoyance if I have to print out a document or a ticket to attend an event. I just don't do it anymore. Yeah. Everything's on my phone.
Yeah.
So I think that printing has maybe become almost archaic as well. So anything we can do, and of course good for the environment.
Absolutely.
But anything we can do in that space. And actually, the most important thing is that this is what the current cohort of student tenants going out there, this is what they expect. They've never been in a time when they expect to need a printer or a scanner.
And modern landlords as well, because the landlords are getting younger as well. So again, it's just staying with the times, and again, it's a fun way to do new business as well. And let's not forget, and I'll get into it later on, but using PropDocs actually creates a new revenue stream for you by using PropDocs with PropertyButton. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but just to kind of go into a little bit about electronic leases and PropDocs and how we can help here. But simply put, we've added two new pieces of functionality to our existing clients dashboard. Now, existing clients who haven't signed up for a trial of PropDocs will not see these two new pieces of functionality. But when they do, they will see two new buttons. One is to send a lease, which is obvious in itself, and the other area then is to manage lease templates. And I'll talk a little bit more about the detail about that, but also just to remember that at all times within PropertyButton, and we really pride ourselves and we try our best anyway with some limited resources that we have, that we offer some really good customer support. So within our portal, throughout the PropDocs trial and using PropDocs going forward, there is that live chat functionality at all times. But simply going into some of the weeds of PropDocs and more into the number two there, manage these templates. This area, when you click on it, it's as simple as a Word document, and it really is. And using PropDocs, you can customize your or even edit your existing leases that you have, that you currently use for students or for any other type of resident. And you can upload them to PropDocs and edit them at any time. But also you can customize lease agreements and instructions can be very different to students in particular, and maybe based on rules or even penalties if something that are out of place. And with a mixed portfolio that many of our clients have, you can upload conventional residential leases into PropDocs, and you can also build unique student housing leases into PropDocs. And that saves a lot of time for a letting agent over the student season, or any time of the year, because when you have all your templates put into PropDocs, all you need to do is just revert back to them at all times. So it's not a case of printing out paper, writing up the new lease, typing out the new lease. It's just your templates is going to be there at all time. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there, Carol, and all our audience out there, some of the yellow highlighted areas are the areas that will be automatically updated when you start putting in information about the new tenancy. And the great thing about PropDocs is that it's tied to our utility management service as well. So we not only do the electronic lease part of things, but on the back of that information that you're putting into the lease, that's also populating the utility switch form as well. So you're doing two things at once. You're sending the lease, but you're also triggering the utility switch from our side to make sure that landlords aren't overpaying on bills, and that the tenant, most importantly, is set up and not disconnected and facing penalties. So there's no duplication there of data, which actually brings me on to my next slide, which is within the send a lease button. And within the send a lease button, after you have you've created your lease templates, and they're all there, and you have your dedicated student lease ready to go, you go into the send a lease section. This is where you populate with the relevant tenancies information. So the tenant itself information, the landlord information, the length of the lease, the security deposit check that's being received, and obviously information about rental payments per month. So this is where you populate that information, and that avoids a lot of duplication from your traditional way of doing things, because the tenancy information will automatically merge into our utility transfer section, as I already mentioned. And then also populate, as I mentioned, the lease template that you've chosen for this particular lease. So when you go to send a lease, you'll be asked, what lease template would you like to use for this particular tenant or tenancy? And when you're filling out the information here, it's populating in other areas to make it really simple, really streamlined, and really quick for you as a busy property manager and letting agent. So it's really simple, and there's no software installation at all for this. A lot of our letting agents will already be using our portal for the utility management service, but we will, as part of PropDocs and as part of a free trial, we will hold a letting agent tenant for the first 5 leases. So when they're ready to, get set up, we'll make sure that their leases are uploaded correctly, their lease templates, and we'll assist them with sending the leases for 5. And the reason we say 5 is because after 5, there's no doubt that you'll be an absolute whiz at PropDocs, but we want to have that customer support there for you anyway, for if you ever have any questions throughout the free trial period. And the free trial period, for some might add, is 30 days and completely free.
I'm just thinking this would obviously be streamlining the process like this. I presume it makes compliance much more straightforward.
It does indeed, Carol, and I'm glad you raised that, because there's a bit of, with all the regulation out there as well, our digital signature is legal here in Ireland, and we've been obviously in touch with the RTB and reading up in the High Court cases, and it absolutely is. Electronic signatures are very much legal here in Ireland, which is great, and it's great news for letting agents out there, because they're constantly trying to keep up with legislation. And the fact that PropDocs and electronic leases using PropDocs is fully compliant with all laws and regulation in the industry, it's just another string to its bow, and another help for you, and another assurance for you as a letting agent that you are complying with regulation. And hooray for that, because there's lots of it. But sending a lease is as simple as 5 steps with PropDocs. As I mentioned there, step 1, you just simply populate the portal with the tenancy information, and then once you hit send in the portal, that will send that lease to the tenant first, and the tenant can simply review the contract or the lease in place, and can sign it on any device, anywhere, anytime. And then once that is signed and received, that will then trigger the same lease to go to the landlord, where the landlord can then review the lease and see that it's been signed by the tenant, and then they can sign it in turn. When they've done so, the letting agent receives the finished lease, if you will, the finished electronic document, the finished PropDocs with both lease signatures, which again is really important now, because a lot of the cases going back to the RTB now, as you know, Carol, are all around, was the lease signed at the beginning? No. Okay, we have a problem here. Were they signed? They were indeed. Great stuff. We're on the right track here. And PropDocs allows for that, assurance for letting agents that your leases are signed, and not only are they signed, but they're signed quickly and efficiently and in a new way. And that's one of the kind of key elements to this. And with PropDocs and this new way of overcoming this big challenge of the lease area of the student busy season, no more paperwork, no more tenants slipping away because the email that the PDF lease was in got lost in all their millions of emails. Same with the landlords. And no more trips for you out to the property to get leases signed. And maybe that is a current way of doing things, but maybe maybe you could start thinking of other ways to get leases signed. And PropDocs is definitely something that they'll be your best friend in that regard. And also, no students coming into your office and having to come in and sign leases. And same for your valued customers, your landlords, who might be away and who might just not be around to sign a lease and to come into your office. So it really benefits everyone. And you can see here, the process of setting up a new tenancy as a result of PropDocs is that it's cut out a lot of the steps of the process that we talked about earlier on. Now, when we're signing up new tenants to new tenancies into the new property, we still have to verify tenant references and choose the best tenants. That's absolutely always going to be part of it, and we're always going to be collecting security deposit. But now we've kind of brought in the whole lease section of preparing the lease, signing the lease, and we've also brought that, as I mentioned earlier on, into the back of our utility management process as well. So when the lease is signed, not only are you alerted, but we are alerted here in PropertyButton as well, because then we start the process of transferring the utilities, which is a big part of the process. So now that's a one-step process now for a letting agent. And then, of course, you have to register with the PRTB. which is absolutely fine.
And in terms of registering with the RTB,
that
one thing I think that maybe landlords aren't aware that even if they fail to register, the RTB will still look to enforce the statutory terms of a lease arrangement. So in fact, failure to register with RTB means that the tenant can still rely on the RTB protection, however the landlord can't, irrespective of where the fault lies. So in fact, having that as an inbuilt step is hugely valuable for the landlord. And I think most letting agents would deal with that automatically. So in fact, to have this inbuilt, I think is going to further help the compliance issue.
Absolutely.
It will give no excuse for non-compliance.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're cutting out steps here. We're getting everything done in one time in one portal. And not to forget as well that these digital cloud-based documents, they're all stored. So you're not filing hundreds of documents anymore. They're stored in our cloud where you can access at any time when you need to, which is really, really, really important as well. And again, just being fully compliant. And just talking about some of the benefits of PropDocs during the busy season, because look, there's paper going everywhere and it's a big rush. But with PropDocs, avoid all the unnecessary phone calls that digital means brings, texts and faxes and emails and delays that they cause. And use this time that you've saved supporting your existing clients and winning new clients as well. Save hassle and enjoy a better work-life balance in general, because of the time saved, and use the money saved as a result of the administrative cost savings to reinvest in your staff and your marketing and your business in general. And don't forget, with PropDocs, you can create a new revenue stream as one of the packages with PropDocs. You can choose the package for PropDocs. That's €40 per month. But with that, we will give you commission for using the service. As some of our existing customers know, we do provide commission to our customers for using our service. And now that our utility management service is on the back of PropDocs, that's a real nice revenue stream for agents they wouldn't have had in the past, and offer a point of differentiation in a market that's changing. And you can do this in a really effective way with PropDocs, but with really little investment. I'm like, there's three packages of PropDocs. You can take it for free and you don't get commission. You can take it for €40 per month and you get commission, or you can take it for an annual. An annual amount of 360, which is equivalent of €30 per month. So about a 20% saving there as well. And what are you doing here? You're meeting the needs, most importantly, of the digitally demanding market of students, which is something you were discussing earlier on, Carol.
Yeah, absolutely, because not only have I been in this space for a decade and a half, but in fact I actually fall into the category of being one of the parents who's going to be worried about this September, because my own little darling, my only daughter is starting university, so we're going to be on the other side of this September. So, and actually one of the things that's quite frustrating is that there's no way to prepare for this in advance, because you don't know what university that your child is going to end up in. So you really do only have those handful of days when you get your college place to try to secure your accommodation, when everybody else is trying to secure their accommodation. So yeah, and in terms of being digitally demanding, I would suggest that teenagers are demanding right across the board. But you're right. This is how they live. This is how they communicate. This is how they interact with the world. So they expect the world to interact back with them via digital, and that's what's happening. So it makes absolute sense to do it. So I suppose I'm coming at it from two sides here.
Absolutely.
And
but you know what?
I know this is the way it has to happen.
Absolutely. And we've talked about how the speed of this process can provide a better return on investment for your landlord. Good old Tony Soprano there. Because of the speed at which it speeds up the process, providing rent to your landlords quicker. But we're talking about students here, and students talk, Carol, and there's no doubt about it. And they talk online and they review, and the fact that students talk is really pertinent to boosting landlord references and referrals, because when a student does mention you online, hopefully for good with PropDocs as well, because it's something new and different, or when they review you through Google tools or anything like that, that boosts your positioning within Google and the search engine optimization, which is a challenging area. And it was interesting that boosting your online reviews will not only improve your company's search performance, but it will also attract new landlords. Because just an example here that I just took off the internet really quickly before this webinar was just, this is just an example of when you see something online, and it's really clear that when you're a landlord and you're searching for a letting agent to work for, you're going to go with a landlord or with a letting agent, should I say, with the best rating. And your tenants, will be rating your service maybe, or maybe it'll be your landlord rating your service, but whatever it is, you want to look like a good letting agent from both sides of the coin. And I asked the question here, if you were looking for someone online, who would you call first? And so it's obviously there, this is an American example, but you would probably most likely go to Y-Star Group there.
That's really interesting. What you're doing is you're absolutely tapping into this current generation's need for social proof before they buy anything.
Yeah.
It is about social proof. It's about the influences that they get online, who they've been influenced by, and that does, of course, affect the ratings that a service gets. Absolutely refers to where they're going to go. And in fact, you're right when you say they talk, because actually this is particularly true in the student accommodation sector, more so than any other part of the residential sector, that they absolutely will be following social proof. So actually, for letting agents, I think this is a real challenge, that they do need to get themselves online to where students are having these conversations.
Yeah.
And they do need to spread the love as such, because that's what's happening. They need their tenants to do this and to speak up for them and to rate them. And in fact, I think the Facebook pages of estate agents and letting agents, it's really interesting to see how 5 years ago letting agents wouldn't have thought that was a necessary thing at all once they have their website, whereas now we see that actually people are coming to them through Facebook pages as opposed to their website.
Yeah, absolutely. And so are landlords. And landlords see these reviews, and landlords want to be matched with good tenants, and good tenants want to be matched with good landlords. And so, think of the broader picture, I guess. I'm providing delivering an excellent customer service to your tenants and to your landlord. They all add up to your overall customer service, which will boost your ratings, and which will then boost client referrals and client retention as well. So it's great. So it's a digital era, but it's really fun, and we should be embracing it. And here at Property Button, we really are, and we're constantly trying to offer our clients more value, and PropDocs is just one of those areas. And we just saw the fact that PropDocs would be very, very helpful, in particular to a very rushed environment such as the student rush. So then moving on then, as part of the agenda, finding that perfect tenant. And as we all know there, it's not easy. It's not easy for property managers, for letting agents, but it's what their clients expect, understandably, and it's what their clients want and demand. And we said we'd offer some tips and hints into finding the perfect tenant. And to be honest with you, there's no sure bets in this, but you can take precautions. And I use the metaphor here with Puss in Boots, because you'll often get a call from a student's mom saying, look, my son, he's an angel, she's an angel. And then you'll hear from him then saying, yeah, I'm a real angel, right? And he'll be in somewhere enjoying himself. So it's very conflicting for agents, and they need to take it on face value often, but they never know sometimes what they're going to get. But there's some precautions that they can take, and we've identified some of the precautions here. And I think having a real understanding of the various student personas is really important. There's a variety of student types out there, and they're at various maturity levels as well, let's not forget, because when we think of students, we just think of the crazy party animal. But there's mature students.
I think that's first years.
Yeah, more so first years.
Once they get into first year, I think that quietens down, and it's interesting actually, because one of the largest student accommodation providers that moved from the UK into the Irish market, one of the things that they particularly commented on was the different work ethic and behaviour of students, and they were predominantly in the Scottish market, and they said there was a huge difference between students in the Scottish market and students in the Irish market, they felt that there was such a work ethic towards their study. Irish parents would be delighted to hear this.
Absolutely.
They felt there was a huge work ethic in one way in terms of their study, but also actually in respecting the property. So they've had far fewer issues in terms of property damage, antisocial behaviour, interfering with the neighbours, and having any issue with deposit returns or needing to withhold deposits. So in fact, they found the Irish market markedly different to the UK and Scottish market. So that's one thing that should hearten landlords and letting agents.
Absolutely.
And parents.
And parents, exactly. So having a real understanding of the various types of students out there, and maybe not putting them all into one bin, but understanding there are mature students, there's graduates, there's exchange students, there's part-time students with kids as well. And I suppose just to impress the importance of agreements and penalties to students that are coming into the market for the first time, it's just really, and this may seem very obvious, but really making it very clear that this is the consequence of certain actions. If you mess the place, or if you don't report problems before they become problems, there are processes in place and penalties, and making it very clear to students from the very beginning that there's eviction possibly here, there's penalties, but embedding that and impressing that to the student at the beginning of the tenancy process, it will help just finding that perfect tenant and cementing that a little bit more and just taking those precautions.
And what's interesting actually, and it really just occurs to me that in fact, because most of these, particularly first years coming out, will be just turning 18, 19, for a lot of them, this will be their first commercial contract. This will be the first contract they sign. So while yes, their parents might be guarantors, this will be the first legal responsibility that they have outside of school, and it'll be their first foray into adulthood. So yeah, I think you've hit on a really excellent point there, that it's about managing the expectations. And I think that, as with all commercial contracts, that expectations need to be aligned on both sides. So I feel that it's very important that students know what to expect, what behaviour is expected, how they're expected to treat the property. But similarly, that goes both ways, because they're no longer children, they're adults in an adult contract.
Yeah.
So in fact, it's really important that they understand what their rights are under this, and what rights they have with respect to what they can expect from their landlord and the letting agent. So yeah, absolutely, aligning expectations and making sure that everybody's on the same page is probably the best way to start.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely well made. And just also some other areas as well, just around verifying references, just going online, and again it seems very obvious, but Googling your prospective tenants and following up on their social media, which is not hard to find these days, but looking at their LinkedIn, perhaps seeing any previous employer recommendations, looking at some of their skills, and by Googling a lot of these tenants, you never know what you're going to find, but you may actually find that, wow, this tenant is actually really good, they were awarded something there last year. So just to kind of bear those online tools and search engines in mind, and consider your marketing and also where you're marketing, because where you're marketing can often attract the best tenants too. If they see it in prestigious places, or if they see that your marketing efforts are very sophisticated and you've spent time doing this marketing, they'll respect that, because students these days, they're responding to advertising, they're responding to marketing as well. So again, just it's a small step, but it will attract good tenants, I think, good marketing. But then again, I'm biased as a marketer myself. But also, very simply, meet the parents. Maybe this is a phone call, I don't know, but sometimes meeting parents can be a precaution in that. And
certainly speaking to them. I think when you're dealing with students, particularly where the parents are going to be guaranteeing the rent, even if the tenant themselves is the student, I think it's crucial, whatever about meeting them, that definitely a phone call happens as well, because you need to know who you're dealing with. And as with any contract, it all comes down to enforceability. You need to know who you're going to be enforcing against if and when that day comes.
Absolutely. So we're just going to push a little bit for time here, guys. So there's some of the ways there, and again, you'll be emailed this recording and slides as well. But just going on then to, and I hope my screen isn't frozen. Okay, great stuff. The future of Ireland's rental industry, a broad area But again, I'd just like to open up to the floor to all our listeners in here. And Carol, just to share some of your insights and where you see the future of Ireland's rental industry from all aspects.
Yeah, no, it's interesting actually, because I've been involved in this industry for about a decade and a half now, and it's actually pushing for almost 2 decades when I consider that my background is actually in law, so we were dealing with the conveyancing side of it before that. And what I'm seeing in the last 5, 6, 7 years is that I think we're definitely going more towards a niche area. You know, previously rental market in Ireland was only ever about servicing tenants who were perhaps social tenants or very young professionals while they saved, or student accommodation. And student accommodation was very much the bottom rung of the ladder. It was very poor quality, it was cheap, and it wasn't always in the best areas, you know, even for safety or convenience, whereas that's really changed. Already, and I know that there are questions over the quality of student accommodation. I know that we certainly haven't got to the level that we need to get to. However, that's absolutely changing, and I think one of the biggest trends that we're going to see, because we're already seeing it with the rise of professional landlords right across Ireland and right across Europe as well. You know, Ireland, we're an island, but we can't exist as an island market. So we are, of course, subject to trends that happen. Particularly if we look at the UK market, what we saw is that student accommodation was very heavily focused on there probably in the last 2 decades. And as a result, the delivery has been top quality accommodation in key strategic locations for students. But it is more expensive, so it's pricey, and that's definitely something that parents and students need to be aware of. However, what you're getting in return is a far superior quality than what you would have gotten in the past. So in terms of key trends, I think that we're absolutely seeing more institutional landlords as opposed to private landlords, and that creates a need for very professional letting agents. So letting agents, there's no longer, I don't think that this wait and see approach works. I think everything needs to be very streamlined. Delays, I think in the last 10 years we're aware that delays actually cost money, and I'm not sure if we were aware of that more than a decade ago. So where we're getting to is an area of much higher professionalism and hopefully much better quality, but there will be distinct areas. So I think we're going to see students in student accommodation. I think we're going to see young professionals in professional accommodation, and we're going to see actually the rise of lifetime tenants that we never saw in Ireland before. But that's a conversation for another day.
Absolutely, we'd love to have you back in as well. So thank you very much for that. So just moving on quickly, guys, because we're still a bit over time, but I just wanted to wrap up with some student season best practices. And go paperless. Try out PropDocs, have a free trial, play around with it, and be used to it then for the student rush. Appeal to landlords and to tenants. Invest in your marketing to save time and get really good quality leads in. Make quick, informed decisions on applicants, and just stay organized in the office and on the go. And again, you know, you all probably are, no doubt. So what's next? This recording and the slides will be posted to our blog within 48 hours. You can visit the blog at propertybutton.io/blog. You'll also receive an email when it's up, and you know, just start preparing for the student season, I guess. Have a free 30-day free trial at PropDocs. Have a feel around. It's super easy. Any questions, we have all the support. You can sign up for a free trial at propertybutton.io/PropDocs, or give us a call or an email here at any time. So again, guys, thank you very much indeed for your time today. We really appreciate it. Any questions, please email us in here. Carol, thank you very, very much for having us. You were an absolute pleasure. I'm glad you came out here to Property Button and you saw where we work and how we work.
And the office puppy.
And the office puppy, of course. So thank you, everyone, and have a really lovely day, and happy prop docking.